Hello, and welcome to another edition of the Power Hour. Do not change your channels. Yes, we're coming to you on this Thursday. We do thank you so much for your grace and patience. Today, we have a really great program. We're going to be doing the candidate forum for the 24th Legislative District for the Democrat candidates. Those are the only candidates who are registered and who are in this contested race. We reached out to all of the registered candidates, and these are the ones who responded to show up for you this evening. Today, our forum will consist of 3 people who are running to be the state rep for the 24th Legislative District in the May 17th election. We just had the special, and now we're on to the May primary for the May 17th election. This form will be done in alphabetical order from start to finish. Candidates will have 2 minutes to answer questions and 30 seconds for a rebuttal. We have a series of questions that we've already drafted, and for fairness, none of the candidates have seen the questions prior to this recording. And so we're going to go ahead and get started. Our first candidate is Martell Covington, who is the rep-elect of the 24th District, who is a former state student aide and community organizer. Welcome to the program, Martell.
Hi, thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for joining us. Our next candidate is Latasha D. Mays, who is a reproductive justice organizer, an advocate for gender equity, and who has spent the last few years working to uplift women and girls in this region. Welcome to the program, Latasha D. Mays.
Thank you so much. Thank you to One Hood for providing such a great forum for us to discuss our campaigns and ideas.
Thank you so much for joining us. And our final candidate is Randall Taylor, a community organizer who has worked along the intersections of housing and equity. Welcome to the program, Randall.
Miracle, welcome. Thank you, One Hood, Kahari, and also John. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And like I said, we're going to start in alphabetical order. So it'll be Martell, Latasha, and then Randall. Can you please talk about what motivated you to enter into this race? Start with you, Martell.
Yes. So good evening, everybody. I'm Representative-elect Martell Covington. I was successful in a special election, and I am running in the primary election to represent the new 24th District. I was born and raised in Homewood. I grew up in a family of community organizers that, worked to quell gang violence in the early and mid 90s and developed the after-school program that is still around today, that has impacted thousands of young people throughout the Eastern community. I'm a proud graduate of Pittsburgh Central Catholic High School and Howard University. Work for Community Empowerment Association in multiple capacities. I am a former coordinator of Pittsburgh Black Family Reunion. And until February, for the past 3.5 years, was legislative aide to State Senator Jay Costa. Currently a football coach and softball coach for Homewood Community Sports. Also, I'm a board member for Gwen's Girls, Kelly Strayhorn Theater, Community Empowerment Association, and Open Field International. I am here because of purpose. My family's life mission has been service to the community, and my life's mission has been service to the community, to this community, the 24th District. And I have been grateful enough to have your support this far, and I look forward to having you all support as we move forward into the final leg of this election in the primary. Once again, thanks to One Hood, Kahari, Miracle, John, and everybody behind the scenes for developing this forum. And I'm excited to speak. I'm excited to talk about campaigns and what I look to do in the State House. But once again, thanks for this opportunity. I look forward to speaking with you all.
Thank you so much. And now on to you, Latasha.
Thank you, Miracle. Again, it is brings me great joy to join this forum today. My name is Latasha D. Mays. I use she, her pronouns. Many of you are familiar with my work as founder, president, and CEO of New Voices for Reproductive Justice, where I served in that leadership role for about 18 years. And during that time I was able to do some great things along with so many of you who are watching tonight, along with One Hood and other organizations who have impacted the very DNA of progressive politics in the greater Pittsburgh region. I have served the greater Pittsburgh community as a leader, as a community organizer and public servant for over 22 years. 22 years of progressive, experienced, and impactful leadership in action. For me, it's all about how do we center those first and most impacted by critical political, economic, and social justice issues? How are we confronting power, specifically white supremacist power and patriarchal power? As well as how are we building the political influence of those who have been marginalized, left out, ignored, specifically the voices and experiences of Black women, femmes, and gender expansive folks? We are the heart and backbone of the democracy, and we make the world go round in terms of politics. But when it's time for us to actually have decision making and be in positions of power where we know what's best for our community, we often face many challenges. And so that inspired me to run for the 24th Legislative District, a place I've called home since I was about 22 years old. And I look forward to this conversation. And thank you, One Hood, once again.
Thank you so much. Randall?
Well, my name is Randall Taylor. I use he, him pronouns. And I started my journey in Pittsburgh through the Pittsburgh Public Schools, graduated University of Pittsburgh. And in the early 90s, I began to work as a community organizer with the Pittsburgh Coalition Against Substance Abuse, which I eventually became a youth director. And we fought very much in the 90s around the issue of drugs, or particularly around gangs, which were prevalent in the 1990s. And I'm so proud today that we don't have Crips and Bloods in the city of Pittsburgh. Our young people are not afraid to go to neighborhoods, different neighborhoods as they were. And that's a level of work. And from there, I've shown leadership in any number of positions, from chair to NACP Education Committee, chair to East End Healthy Start Consortium, that worked with young mothers to make sure that their babies lived. And I believe we were quite successful in that. I served for 12 years on the Pittsburgh Board of Education, proud of many accomplishments there, such as the refurbishing of Westinghouse High School and the building of Faison Elementary School. And so continue my work in education and with young people, which I enjoy. But in 2015, I received a knock on my door, like a couple hundred of my neighbors at Penn Plaza, saying, "Get the hell out in 90 days." And that began a new chapter in my life about fighting for affordable housing, fighting for living wages. I was a hospital worker and fought with Hospital Workers Union to try to unionize our workers so they would have a living wage. We began to, again, show leadership. I think I've done that. I have a track record. A position such as state representative, I think, will give me even more to amplify the voices that people need to be heard and amplify, again, what needs to be done. We must challenge the powers that be, even with those powers that be are our own elected officials. So I hope to be hired as the next state representative.
Thank you so much. And thank you, John, for building our clock so we have a fair time. So we're going to go in reverse order, be Randall, Latasha, and Martell. Our first question really of the forum is, there's a lot of conversations around public health and safety, especially in the past couple of weeks. As state rep, what would you mobilize and organize and advocate for in Harrisburg? Starting with you, Randa, then you, Latasha, and then you, Martell.
Well, the answer to violence in our communities are not in Harrisburg. They're actually in our communities. And the best thing and the most effective thing are prevention programs. We have to work to make sure that child never picks up a gun, let alone to use that gun. And so violence is a very difficult situation, and we need our schools functioning the way that they should. But the main thing that we can do to prevent gun violence, like I said, is to put young people in a positive environment around positive people. A good friend of mine, Carl Redwood's father, Carl Redwood Sr., legendary youth worker in the Hill in the 1940s. And I asked him, what were they doing in the 1940s? They had gangs and wannabes at that time. And he said, again, the same formula: put children in a positive environment around positive people and reinforce a positive message. And that's simply what we did in the 90s. Oh, yes, we did organize Mothers Against Violence, who were parents who had lost their children to violence, and began to speak to other families about what they can do to prevent the tragedy that befell their families. But that's the bottom line. Now, we did get a lot of support from the foundation communities, and they funded groups like East End Youth Outreach, Ron Brown's program, Frank Chapman up in East Hills were working there, and those were effective programs. So it still doesn't change. Now, yes, I do think we should do more innovative things like they've done in places like Chicago, which I think could be more successful here because we're a smaller place and not as many drugs and things running around. But one thing they do is it could be a young person who receives a letter in the mail and says, you are a candidate to either kill somebody or be killed. Come in and let's talk. And so I do think there are things we can do to diminish violence in our communities. But as long as we have guns proliferating, as long as we're under the same laws as a Elk County in Pennsylvania, we need home rule around guns. We have too many guns on our street and too many illegal guns. So I believe that's some of the solutions we can do to diminish gun violence in our communities.
Thank you so much. Latasha?
Thank you for asking such an important question. One of my platform issues, it includes community safety. Of course, we absolutely have to look at the gun violence that is impacting our communities, particularly young Black men, in that we have to have interventions that are trauma-informed, that are intersectional. We have to understand the abject poverty that is driving, as well as access to guns, is abject poverty that is also driving gun violence. And what kind of laws, as Randall was saying, that need to be tightened and implemented. There's always more that we can do in terms of legislation, but legislation is not there when a person is making a decision about ending someone else's life, or in some cases in their own life, or a domestic partner or intimate partner. And so for me, I think we have to look at it in a broader way, looking at the different segments impacted by gun violence specifically, but also domestic violence, intimate partner violence, as well as LGBTQ plus driven violence. We also have to look at how we support families in the aftermath of these kinds of tragedies. One of the last things I did while I was leading New Voices was I instituted the Say Her Name Justice Fund, which creates a financial pot of money for Black women, femmes, girls, gender expansive folks who have been severely impacted by a tragic incident, or they've lost a child. They've lost a Black woman, a femme or girl or gender expansive person in their family. And so that provides critical resources on the ground unconditionally, in terms of it's not income based. It's about what a family or what a community may actually need in that moment. And I'm proud of that work and would bring that kind of innovation to this role as state representative.
Thank you. Martell?
Yes. Before I address a discussion about public safety, I have to speak the name of my little brother, Davon Vickers, who was murdered in broad daylight at the corner of North Homewood Avenue and Frankstown Avenue 2 weeks ago today. The situation to address public safety in our community is there's not a one-size-fits-all thing. Mr. Taylor is correct. The answers are not only in Harrisburg. They are in Harrisburg as well. We do need to do more to address gun safety. We need to do more to push legislation to talk about, or to address lost and stolen guns. We need to do more to push extreme risk protection order legislation through, which will remove the firearms out of the homes of people that may be a threat to themselves or others. So there are things that can be done in Harrisburg, but we also do have to do more in our communities. And we have to make sure that we are addressing poverty. We also have to make sure that we have educational opportunities for our young people. And we also have to make sure we have financial opportunities for our young people. We have to make sure that there are new jobs, there are new pathways, there are new opportunities and career opportunities for our young people. These are things that we have to develop. And also programming. You look at East Hills, there are over 760 young people under the age of 18 in East Hills, and there's no programming there. So we have to develop opportunities for our young people. And the thing that we also have to address and no one wants to talk about is the culture that we're dealing with right now. We're dealing with a new culture through social media that we haven't seen before. We're seeing, new people or people that are focused on guns and wanting guns. So we also do have to address the accessibility of firearms in our community with young people. But we have to talk about the culture right now that's being set. And we have to be sure that we're addressing that culture right now, because young people are growing up these days are growing up the ways that I grew up. So we have to make sure that we're addressing the culture as well that young people are growing up in when it comes to violence.
Much. And for this round of questions will be Latasha, Randall. Latasha, Martell, then Randall. Speaking on public safety, a lot of people talk about the need for economic advancement in the 24th district. How will you go about advancing economic opportunity while balancing the fears for gentrification and displacement? Latasha, Martell, then Randall.
Thank you. Well, one of the first things that we can do legislatively is to raise the minimum wage. Minimum wage is $7.25 in our state. There have been years of organizing around raising the wage to $15. And that to me is extremely basic in terms of what that means. Someone is making about $30,000 a year. And that depends on if you are in the home by yourself, if you have other partners or other adults, if you have children in the home. And so if we look at cost of living according to region, I think that would be a more effective way to address income inequality. The other opportunity we have is the opportunity for workers to unionize. All across the 24th legislative district, we see workers in different industries and sectors wanting to form a union to ensure that they have living wages, sustaining wages, as well as benefits and workplace protections. Of course, I have to talk about equal pay, paid sick days, and pregnancy accommodations. When you're working in certain industries, a lot of benefits and workplace conditions are taken for granted, and making sure there's legislation that's protected in advance is important. We know that Black people have been displaced from so many communities in the 24th. Especially East Liberty. It is totally, it's such a sterile place than what it has been in the past from my 22 years of being in the community. And I think that we know that development happens really decades before it comes into fruition. So we have to build for a future that is equitable, inclusive, and that is centering those who would be likely further displaced. And for me, it always has to be driven and informed by community input, leadership, and organizing.
Thank you so much, Martell.
Yes. First, we have to address the fact that we do not have a Black middle class in Pittsburgh. When you look at other cities all throughout the United States of America, they have Black middle class, they have a Black middle class community. And we don't have so here in Pittsburgh. And the middle class is the way that you lift up economically. The middle class is the way that you uplift the people in that area. So we have to make sure that we're addressing that. And that does start with increasing the minimum wage. And as soon as I'm able to, after April 26th, I plan to sign on to legislation to increase the minimum wage to $15. That's a start. We also have to make sure that we have supports in place for small businesses and entrepreneurs, Black-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, LGBTQIA-owned businesses. We have to make sure that there's a focus and support primarily on those types of businesses in the 24th district. And I'll have a plan for us to develop a business collaborative with business owners from all over the 24th district to be able to bring them together to a table to discuss issues that they're having and concerns that they're having. So that's a focus that we have to make sure that we're developing. It's super important, especially coming out of COVID. We also have to make sure that, like I said before previously, we have to develop economic opportunities for young people. We have to develop pathways for young people into the unions, into job forces, into some of the new technology spaces that are developing, whether it's coding or whether it's AI. And we also have to make sure that we're pushing and making sure we're providing opportunity for young people to be part of a way to build up this district. And when it comes to gentrification, when it comes to the need for investment, community benefits agreements are some things that people suck their teeth at. But when you look at CBAs, community benefits agreements in other cities, there are ways to uplift the community through those development plans and making sure that people aren't displaced and making sure that there are funds and resources that are coming to people in those communities where this development is coming. These are things that we can do, but you have to have a radical imagination to do so.
Randall?
When I first decided to run against Ricky Burgess in the spring of 2019 or the winter of 2019, one of my platforms was $18 an hour in the union. $15 an hour is not sufficient then, it's not sufficient now. So I'll decide whether I want to make it $20 in the union because people need a living wage in this city. And so, Miracle, I don't try to do big jobs in cities in Pittsburgh any longer because they tend to fire people like me. So I keep my living expenses down. And one of the things I kept was a part-time job as a hospital worker at Mercy Hospital the last 5 years. And I quit during the pandemic because they were too unsafe with their employees. So, I worked with hospital workers rising at SCIU for the past 4 years, and we worked to try to unionize people. It was the most difficult form of unionizing of organizing I've ever experienced because these are people's jobs. But I know how people are living because they were my friends at that hospital, and many people, they just work there just to live. I think about some who have children and who have been there for 6 or 7 years and exactly what the future holds for them. So we must fight for a union, and we must have leaders and elected leaders that fight for those people. And I promised them that I got been elected city councilors. I promised them if I'm elected state house, if anybody harasses you because you decide you want to engage in union activities, State Representative Randall Taylor will be there. And we have your marches. I mean, we've had marches where elected officials have come, but when we were in our most desperate moments during COVID, where UPMC was actually putting the lives of its workers in jeopardy, a lot of times all we got from elected officials on the Zoom calls, and we had anybody from Senator Casey on, was you guys are heroes, but nobody stepped up to make sure that those workers were protected. Our low-income workers in the city, and that's going to be Black people for a while, need a union so they can bargain for themselves and get living wages for their family. Even if you're going to work at UPMC for 15 years, you're getting up, you're going to work every day. You deserve to be able to take your children to Cedar Point or give them a good Christmas like every other person who hits that alarm clock in the morning.
Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate that. And we're going to move on, switching gears just a little bit. In this round will be Martell, Randall, and then Latasha. We mentioned earlier the new legislative 24th district. We also know this is an off year. So you're coming off of redistricting and now you're meeting new folks. So how are you planning on mobilizing people to come out to May 17th when you have like a little over a month and a half to kind of meet your new constituents? Martell, Randall, then Latasha.
You have to meet people where they're at. One of my favorite rappers, Jadakiss, said, you got to come to the hood to reach us. And that's what we have to do. We got to make sure that we're coming to the communities. We're meeting young people that are recently graduates that are now able to vote. We have to make sure that we're remembering our senior citizen community. And how important they are as stakeholders in our community. So we have to be creative. Our motto has been creativity, courage, and conviction. And we're doing that creatively, making sure that we're providing different ways to make sure that we're meeting with constituents in different areas of the new 24th. The way that we connect with people in West Oakland is going to be different the way you connect with people in Bloomfield. And it's also going to be different the way you connect with people in East Hills. So we have to be creative. We are, connecting with stakeholders in those communities to have different events, to have discussions, to have meet and greets. We're also asking people in those communities, where can we go? Where are good places for us to connect and meet people? These are important things because you can't just come into an area and just ask for people to vote and they don't see you again, or they haven't seen you before that. So we have to make sure that we're providing opportunities for us to develop relationships with people. And it's not a one-off thing where we want you to come vote on the 17th and then I don't see you again for another 2 years. So what we're doing now is developing programming that can be ongoing, that can be interactive, that can be supportive, that is also resource sharing. Anything that we do, we want to make sure that there's a resource sharing focus to it, because we want to make sure that the people are coming out for information or for conversation or to vote are also getting something, whether they're getting support or whether they're getting information about things that are available to them. So we're mixing it up. We're being creative, and we're touching people where they're at, because that's the way you got to do it.
Thank you. Randall?
Well, what I'll be doing is reconnecting with people that I've worked with over the last, 5-6 years around Penn Plaza. We had so many people who came out of Penn Plaza, so many different people, so many university students who came out in that great time of need for those people. But we continue to work to raise the issue about housing and gentrification in this city. I also work with a lot of young people and a lot of people from around the city around police reform last year. As you know, we actually got some legislation written that would create a non-member democratically elected public safety council, would now be in charge of policing budget, how police would police and where. And so I've also, again, continued to work and talk with young people around the issue of not only housing, but now we're really talking about student housing and the exploitation that many of these students are getting on cost and other things. So I don't have to go meet new people because I've already met with them. I've worked with them. We've built up a level of trust, whether it's my LGBTQ friends, whether my Asian friends, as we worked around Stop Asian Hate and begin to try to build coalitions between our emerging Asian community and the African American community particularly. Those are the things that we've already done. And so I think a lot of them are going to be very excited about, if I am the state representative, I think, again, it's going to be able to amplify our issues more, because these issues are not getting any better, particularly around housing. And so we're getting ready, even in the midst of this campaign, to begin to lean into a situation. Not only we're 25, where 18 units are being sold out from under the people on Ripley Street. We must come to their defense, but also there may be another mass displacement that is now getting ready to happen in East Liberty. And so we have to be prepared to fight for our people. And luckily, I have a network of people I can tap into.
Thank you. Latasha?
I have spent many years of my leadership and career as a community organizer. And I don't say that lightly. It means I've been in every position on the front line, providing support to my other colleagues and organizers and activists, as well as the strategists who really have the vision for the kind of communities we want to create. So I am a community organizer, and it is second nature to me to engage our constituents, those that we seek to serve as we run for this position. I've knocked on the doors of voters in the 24th legislative district for over a decade now, bringing critical resources, whether it be through COVID-19 or whether it be through the implementation of the Affordable Care Act, all throughout the district. And knocking on doors as safely as we can. Even we are still in COVID-19 health pandemic, but being able to talk to voters at the door, there's no higher calling you can have in a campaign than to reach as many voters at their homes and wherever they may live, wherever they may be. And that is what I've been doing during this campaign for the primary election on May 17th. I'm also building on 20 years of connections and relationships from so many different segments of this community, of the residents who live in the district. And at the end of the day, voters want inspiring leaders, and they want inspired ideas that they know will result in action by the people that they choose to elect. And for me, it's all about intersectionality and intersectional voter engagement. that's kind of anchored in electoral justice, as well as issue-based organizing, in addition to identity-based organizing, will be important in the time frame that we have left leading up into the primary election.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And the next set of questions will be Randall, Latasha, and then Martell. I know people are tired of hearing about bridges, but we know that infrastructure is a huge issue within our region. Recently, a report found that over 200,000 homes are in need of repair within Pennsylvania. When it comes to infrastructure, are there any specific areas or projects you would like to see investment in and you would advocate for when in Harrisburg? Starting with you, Randall.
Well, again, when our Republican friends are tax cutting and tax cutting and tax cutting may sound nice, but there's a price we pay for that kind of thing. And one of the biggest prices that we paid are investments in education. Not only at our schools. I mean, we've seen cuts in education, not only in public schools, but also in our colleges and universities, our state affiliated colleges and universities. So that's what you get. And one of the things, I mean, another thing that they didn't mind paying for until they seen that was too expensive is building prisons and incarcerating people. But one of the things, the hidden things that you don't have to pay for that people don't notice until the bridge collapses is our infrastructure. And so not only we paid that price here in Pennsylvania, we paid for it across this country. And so, of course, to be competitive economically, you need a strong infrastructure so that commerce can take place. And so we need in this city to begin to spend the money we need to keep these roads and bridges safe. I think there's far too many potholes in the city of Pittsburgh. I mean, far too many. And so we got to figure out how to pay that. Now, our dear friend Councilman Burgess's proposal to tax to tax our students and to tax sick people certainly is not the solution. But one of the solutions that we must unequivocally state publicly as an elected official in the city of Pittsburgh is that UPMC must be taxed. And so we've long looked at the city to initiate lawsuits to do that, but we should pressure our Pittsburgh School Board, who's a taxing body, to initiate that legal challenge to the county can do it as well, to the tax exempt status of UPMC. Yes, they will throw every lawyer they can, but we must fight that out of principle. UPMC must pay their fair share to the city.
Sure.
Thank you. So, of course, our roads and bridges are important for our economic well-being, our social well-being, and we have to be confident as residents in any community that when we cross a bridge, it's not going to crumble to pieces and put our lives in jeopardy. And I think that we do not pay attention to the public works to the degree that we need to. There's a lot of, there's different levels of jurisdiction for how bridges and roads and other pieces of our physical infrastructure are maintained, monitored, repaired, et cetera. So how can we streamline those processes when we have so many municipalities that may be responsible for those types of infrastructure? But I also want to say that infrastructure is also about the people. It's about our communities. Of course, I have to talk about healthcare access and community-based healthcare infrastructure. It is Black Maternal Health Week. And so we know that Black mamas and birthing folks are so important to the fabric of our communities, particularly in the 24th, and that we have to look beyond kind of traditional hospital systems in order to create community care so that we have better outcomes for Black mamas and Black babies. Human resources delivery is another important piece for infrastructure. When we reduce the staffing that we have in our government, we have like the smallest state government staffing right now, one of the lowest rates in the country. That does have a human toll when people need services, when the elderly need services, when those with disabilities and other vulnerable communities need services and care. Public transit has to be equitable, affordable, and of course, sustainable for the communities that it serves, as well as looking at the state's connection to our water and sewage infrastructure is key. And I also will want to point out Wi-Fi infrastructure and connectivity in a highly driven technological age. Those are things that would be of importance and interest to me.
Thank you so much for that answer. On to you, Mr. Martell.
Thank you for this question, because the state of our infrastructure in this region is extremely concerning. We saw it with Fern Hollow, but if you look historically, there have always been concerns since the 80s about the condition of bridges in this region. So we have to first address bridges and roads, and we do have to talk about potholes, but no one talks about the infrastructure underground. No one talks about the sewers. No one talks about sewer sheds and watersheds and things like that. I live close to Washington Boulevard in the 24th district. And I remember when Washington Boulevard flooded, and we lost a family in that flooding. And once again, if you look at history, there have been concerns about the size of the pipes under Washington Boulevard for decades. So we have to begin to look at the infrastructure under the ground as well. And what I want to do as state representative is do an infrastructural audit. If you remember the rain that we had last summer and we had flooding beyond the wharf and other parts of downtown, climate change is real, y'all. And there's a chance that we could have rains like that again this upcoming summer. And I'm not sure how well our city would do with that amount of rain or even more. So we have to really begin to look at the infrastructure under the ground as well, because we have a lot of rivers here. We're dealing with that. We have a lot of abandoned mines. We're dealing with landslides in different parts of the area, including parts of the 24th, like in the Homewood area. So we have to make sure that we're working with PennDOT to address these areas and making sure that we're supporting our constituents that are dealing with issues. I'm thinking about the sewage issue that's happening right now in the Homewood area, and PWSA having to replace sewer lines for people that have been dealing with sewage backup in their homes on Race and Monticello Street for the past 5 to 6 years. So we have to be really, really intense about focusing on infrastructure because it's now become a public health matter. And as your state representative, I take infrastructure seemed extremely serious, and I want to make sure that that audit happens as soon as possible.
Thank you so much. And staying on infrastructure, you mentioned it moment just ago. My next question is going to be around changes to the environment. We know environment and significant weather changes are a growing concern for our region. What is your plan to address these concerns if elected? I'll go Latasha, Martell, then Randall.
So I'm extremely proud to have the support of the Sunrise movement here in Pittsburgh. I received that endorsement recently, and it is about young people driving not only critical change around climate, but also how are we creating opportunities in a new green economy in a place where we can have a version of the Green New Deal here in Pennsylvania. And so I'm really proud to have their support for my decades of work as an environmental justice advocate and activist, policy advocate as well. And so for me, we have to look at fracking. That's something we can do in Harrisburg in terms of a statewide moratorium on new fracking. We want just transition for workers who are coming out of, non-renewable energy industries into again the green economy and renewable energy, and employment opportunities. I think systems and waterways are impacted by pollution, toxic waste, as well as sewage. And that is also infrastructure as well. I've been a part of the Our Water campaign for years as leader of New Voices, preventing privatization of our water as well and protecting water rates is something that we can do in terms of our climate and infrastructure. And something I've been thinking about too is how do we incentivize the residents of this district, particularly our youth, to enter into fields around environmental justice and climate change? And also, how are we preparing them for employment in a changing economic and an environmental economy?
Thank you so much, Martell.
I'm a young person that grew up in this area and grew up with asthma. And it wasn't until I became older that I realized that the reason why I had asthma and dealt with asthma was environment related. Um, that's where I come from. That's where I talk about the environment impacting my lived experience was the way that I could breathe air. Um, so we first have to talk about air quality, which is some of the lowest in the country. But that has to do with collaboration. We have to make sure that we're working with the county to address air quality. We also have to talk about addressing water quality. The 24th district has the water treatment plant in the district. So we need to make sure that we're focusing on increasing or improving the quality of water, and then lead line replacement. I mean, that's the first thing that we have to do. We still have lead lines in our community, so we have to make sure that that effort is moving seamlessly to remove lead lines in homes, outside of homes, and in schools. I think that's the main step. That's the first step that we have to talk about, and then quality of soil, which is something that people don't really talk about often, is making sure that the soil quality is safe at parks or at community gardens or nearby schools, and even with the development that's happening, what is the condition of the soil there? So we have to make sure that we're addressing all these issues environmentally. I also like to mention I was endorsed by the Conservation Voters of PA, which includes 4 different environmentally focused bodies, which includes the Sierra Club, Conservation Voters, Penn Environment, and Cleaner Action Fund. And that's something that I want to be able to sign on to legislation too, to address the environment. But like I said, it starts with lead lines. We have to make sure that we're working along with all of the utility carriers that support our constituents to make sure that that's something that we're starting with, and then we go on from there.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Randall.
Was endorsed by the Sierra Club as well. But I first started hearing about, when I came out of Pitt, I worked in New York City for something called New York Public Interest Research Group. It's a real incubator for learning how to organize. I believe Barack Obama also worked there as well. And so that's when I began to learn about environmental racism, placing toxic dumps near Black communities, polluting buses, going through Black communities. But the main thing we can do as leaders is to begin to not only communicate to Black people that climate change is real. I know people are working and have to do a thing, but climate change is real. And we need to begin to talk about how going to, a Homewood wind farm company and going to solar panels on thing can actually save you and your families money. But the biggest thing that I have to communicate is I'll do all through this race is this should be based on what people have done, not what they're saying they're going to do. And I ran into that challenge. And my friend Chris Bream at the University of Pittsburgh, who does all the census data, has actually written a piece where he talked about in 1998, there was a vote to do a tax zone at the Hazelwood Coke plant. There used to be a mill there. They were fined so much they closed down, and the Sunoco company wanted to come in, take advantage, and restart the Coke mill. And it was very contentious. There was a lot of things going on. It was a 5-4 vote. And a lot of pressure was on me because I worked in a row office at the time, which I was fired from. But again, it was a thought that if you worked in those political kind of jobs, you had to go along with what the political consensus was. It was a 5-4 vote. I voted against giving a tax break, and that Coke plant does not exist in this city. Chris Bream believes had that plant had gone by, had passed, we would not have seen the growth and development we've seen in Pittsburgh. He believes that was a turning point in Pittsburgh because our air would be so polluted we could never have attracted anyone here.
Thank you so much for those answers. I think it's always very important to talk about the intersections of environments, and especially in our regions. So staying on topic, all of you have done work about race and equity prior to running for this office. And when you're state rep, you have a lot of opportunities not only to pass legislation, but to meet with stakeholders and other elected officials. So my question is, what specifically do you believe can be done to improve the lives of Black, disabled, and queer people in this region? Starting the order, Martell, Randall, and then Latasha.
The first step, of course, is to develop legislation. I think about legislation like the Fairness Act, which Dan Frankel has sponsored, and it's a piece of legislation that I plan on co-sponsoring as soon as I'm able to. But we also have to realize that we are in a minority in the House and in the Senate, and a lot of the efforts and focuses that one would do as a state representative would be in the district, would be in the community. Would be bringing resources to those underrepresented communities, developing supports in office and out of office, holding hearings, making sure that we're working with stakeholders or institutions inside this district to address those particular concerns. And once again, this isn't a one size fit all. There's not one magical way to talk about disability justice or racial justice or LGBTQIA justice. There are multiple facets to this. You have to look at the economic angle. You have to look at the education angle. And then also we have to talk about the immigrant community as well, which is expanding and growing in this region as well. And I think about State Representative Sarah Murato's effort to develop a new office for immigrant affairs, which would help, directly in our community. So we have to take a multifaceted approach to addressing these disparities. And like I said, that comes with creativity, that comes with knowing stakeholders on the ground. And also it takes with having to have some hard conversations and making sure that we are being inclusive to every group that's underrepresented in this area, in this region. So it's not just a legislative approach because some of those things may end up being stuck in committee, and we have to be realistic about that. But what other ways can we make sure we're supporting our communities out here and making sure that they have supports, funding, and resources, bringing grants back? That's going to be one of the main focuses so we can make sure that the organizations that have been doing the work on the ground in these communities are continue to be supported and uplifted.
Thank you. Randall?
LGBTQIA community, which I have been, not only just in marching, and I think as an ally to some like me, it is important that I speak out in any space, whether it's inside a Black church or whether it's just a conversation about how all marginalized people, we're facing the same enemy. And when one attack happens on one, it eventually will happen to all. So yes, I have stood up and called a radio show when people I thought were harassing our trans youth. I think these bills that are passing are absolutely should be outrageous to Black people, that they're actually passing laws against one specific human beings. We should be outraged when we see that happen, because that's what happened to us 100 years, where laws were specifically passed against us. And so we have to fight back against those arguments. Well, they can't win trophies or whatever. You put human beings first and how that human being feels. And most importantly, you accept people who they are, how they present themselves to the world. You don't have opinion in that. How they present themselves to the world is who they are. And so we have to stand and fight against that as Black people, because when we don't, it eventually gets to us. So if anybody's seen some news stories today about the Florida legislature who couldn't do redistricting are now putting in the hands of the governor. Now, remember, they were attacking the Don't Say Gay just a few weeks ago. Now they're putting this in his hand, and they know DeSantis wants to do one thing, laser focus, which is destroy 2 Black majority congressional seats. So it used to be us first and everybody else. Now they're a little bit afraid to go at us first. But when you see them going after our trans youth particularly, or immigrants, sooner or later, it'll be back to the ultimate target, which is Black people.
Thank you. Latasha?
I can only speak from my lived experience as a Black lesbian woman who has been open and proud in every way, Black and proud LGBTQ plus and proud in my everyday life, in my everyday leadership. So I live this every single day. And that's what I would bring to this role as state representative. To answer the question around Black, disabled, and queer people, how are we bringing, ensuring that these communities are supported, is that the first thing we have to remember is that they are intersectional communities. So they are not separate. It's not a Black community, a queer community, and disabled community. You have Black, disabled, queer people. You have so many points of intersection that we never look at policy that's going to remedy that intersection, remedy that intersection of oppression, remedy where a person may be facing social, economic, and political challenges because of structural and institutional oppression. We never approach it that way. And that's what I would bring to this role, just my ethos, how I see the world, what my leadership has been. For Black people, it's important to ensure a basic income. And I really support the city's program around giving people additional dollars in their monthly budget that would keep people from falling into the depths of poverty. I would want to see that pilot turn into actual allocation in our budget, as well as equitable public education for our Black students, and making sure that we have jobs with living wages, benefits, the right to form a union, workplace protections, et cetera. For people with disabilities, it's all about examining Medicaid in all the ways that it creates barriers for people with disabilities to survive, not even to thrive, but to survive. And lastly, absolutely, law to say that I'm a human being, regardless of my sexual orientation or gender identity. I would hope that that's the basic thing that we can do when we're talking about legislation. So of course we want to see that passed. The human relations law could be changed today. It doesn't require us to think through have these deep conversations. Are LGBTQ plus people or not? Are we human beings or not? And I think we spend way too much time thinking about it than taking the necessary action to make it be so.
Thank you so much for your passion answer. I really appreciate that. Because we gave Latasha like 25 extra seconds, both of you can have that on your the next question. And this question is, currently there are many bills being presented to alter the way Pennsylvanians are able to access the ballot box, including this week. There is an ongoing conversation whether or not to ban ballot boxes. If you feel comfortable, what is your position on Act 77, and what voting rights protections would you advocate for if elected? Randall, Latasha, and Martell.
Well, I'll yield those 25 seconds to Latasha because they were well used 25 seconds. The right to vote is sacred. And we need to be very serious that the Republican Party knows they cannot win legitimate elections any longer. So they have to gerrymander, they have to steal, and ultimately they're going to get to the place where they just overturn elections. So I believe in same-day registration. You make your voting portable, so if you move somewhere else in the Commonwealth, you don't have to change, you don't have to re-register. Mail-in balloting, drop boxes in many places. There should not be any lines to vote. That's a form of voter suppression. And so we need to make it as easy and accessible to vote as possible. We should make it a holiday, extend early voting. People should be able to make as easy voting as possible. I ain't believe in automatic registration when you turn 18. But I think what people have to understand in this election, and which I hope to show some leadership in, is this an election like we have never seen. And I believe if we get a Republican governor and a Republican Senate, state Senate and House, which we already have, we may never elect not only a Democratic president for the next 20 years. I mean, Democratic governor, we may not elect a Democratic president. These people are serious about what they're doing to make sure we don't vote. So what we have to do as leaders is to really tell our people that we must vote. I am extremely fearful, particularly around education, about what may come. I'm not talking about redoing mass incarceration, all that kind of stuff will be in place. What I really fear is what they may do with public education. And if we get a Republican governor, I can see a scenario where you're announced that there's going to be 20, 25 new charter schools run by some company out of somewhere that will replace the Pittsburgh Board of Education. This is a serious moment, and we need leaders that are particularly pushing our young people, our young African-American males, that you must vote for your family, for you, in the future of this democracy.
Thank you so much, Randall. Going to you, Latasha, and then you, Martell.
I've had the opportunity to advocate for voting rights and protecting free and fair elections going back to at least 2004 in the 24th Legislative District in the greater Pittsburgh region. And I've worked with voters to know what works. When we give people adequate voter education, the opportunities to mobilize and turn them out to vote in a nonpartisan way, but in a way that values their lived experience and the issues that they care about, where we're not coming into a community 2 weeks before an election to ask for their vote, but we have no engagement with them for the rest of the year until it's the time for the next election. I think that is a fundamental shift that has to take place in the politics and in our current democracy. There are lots of things that Randall has already mentioned. I believe early voting centers is essential. I think that we should have mobile opportunities to vote, where we actually can take our early voting centers to more marginalized, geographically marginalized communities. That's something we can do statewide. And it's like we're fighting over drop boxes, literally like a mailbox for ballots. And I think it is reflective of this idea that one of the most powerful things that we have in our democracy is each of us has our one vote. If it was not powerful, our opponents and the powers that be would not work daily to undermine your right to vote. And at the same time, we have to make sure that people understand the system, the political system that we are in. And I feel like that is a lot of education and a lot of community organizing.
Okay, that's me. Okay, all right. First, I am in big support of Act 77, but legislation is already in the making right now to build off of Act 77. House Bill 2090, which was sponsored by House Leader Joanna McClinton, which is called the K. Leroy Irvis Voting Protection Act, has some amendments in it that will establish early voting, that will allow for same-day voter registration on Election Day, and it will also increase poll worker pay. So we heard a talk about lines at polls, but we're not talking about the lack of poll workers or the small amount of money that poll workers get. So if we have funds available to pay poll workers more, and we do more recruiting for poll workers, then we will have those lines. So we have to make sure that we're looking systematically at addressing things like that. You have to look at history. There's been an effort to suppress our vote since Reconstruction. And if you look even more recently in history through the Trilateral Commission, there's always been a plan to make sure that we weren't able to vote, to make sure that we weren't connected and we weren't touched as much as we should, as making sure that we're mobilized and we're engaged to go vote. And we can talk about the Republican Party as well, but the Democratic Party has to do a better job at engaging the Black vote, the brown vote, and young people, as well as the LGBT community as well. And, you know, it was just recently said that people come out and ask you to vote in primaries, but then you don't see them in November. So we have to make sure that that engagement is for real. And that engagement is not just for one race, but for all races. And of course, yes, we do have to make sure that we're keeping a Democratic governor, because that is our stopgap between this problematic legislation that we see bring copycatted here that's coming up from Texas, from Georgia, and from Florida. So we're telling people to make sure they're coming out for the May primary, but people need to come out for the November election just as well, because it's that important. So we have to make sure that education is part of this as well. We can't just expect people to vote without educating on what they're voting on or who they're voting for and what that vote will get them. So we have to make sure that we're being very, very focused on that as well.
Thank you so much. And that has been our forum. So you made it. It wasn't that bad. There were no trick questions. And so I'm going to ask that each of you just give you 2 minutes to wrap up, say anything that you would like, let people know how to get in contact with you. We'll put your links in the chat, and we'll go Martell, Latasha, and Randall. Just your 2-minute wrap up. You feel free to say what you want everyone to say. And Randall, you would also have an extra 25 seconds if you would like, because you haven't, even though you yielded, you haven't used yours. So still want to give you the opportunity. Go ahead and starting with you, Mr. Martin.
Yes. For the final time this evening, I am Representative-elect Martell Covington, born and raised in this district. I'm a kid from Homewood, an area that people don't really expect their state representative to hail from. I've been defying the odds, and I continue to do that. And I'm grateful to be a role model, an example for the young people throughout this city and throughout this country of what you can do, regardless of where you're from. There's a quote that has resonated a lot with me lately, which is be driven by purpose and not position. I've been driven by purpose my entire life. From being a young person that sat in community meetings in my family's living room, or the first building a community empowerment association, to working on different efforts at Howard University and doing student organizing around poor conditions in dorms, which you saw happen earlier this year, but was happening when I was a student at Howard as well, to working at Community Empowerment Association in multiple capacities, and the work that I put into developing the Pittsburgh Black Family Reunion. The purpose and passion of working in State Senator Jay Costa's office is supporting our seniors and supporting our veterans, and making sure that our constituents got the resources that they need. And that's what you're going to get with me as your state representative. Someone that is driven by purpose, someone that understands the lived and shared experiences of our people in our district, and is going to work every day to make sure that we improve those conditions. Someone that's going to sit up late at night and think about certain issues well after work hours are over. I'm still going to be thinking about you and ways that we can improve your life condition. And I wanted to vote for me. You can look up all my information. I've seen it down there. But once again, Representative-elect Martell Covington, and I'll ask for your vote again in the primary. Thank you for your time, One Hood. I really appreciate this opportunity.
Thank you so much. Latasha?
Thank you so much for definitely having us for a power hour. This has been great to have this conversation. I wanted to share the picture in the background. This is from many, many, many years ago, so it's a little pixelated. But this picture is a picture of me speaking in Harrisburg, lobbying for reproductive justice after organizing women of color from Pittsburgh to attend to stop bans on reproductive health care, particularly abortion access. So I have been doing this work for decades. I have been a policy advocate for decades. I've been a community leader for decades, as well as an organizer for decades. And so I'm bringing all of that experience to the role of state representative in the 24th legislative district. I am running on a platform of healthcare access and reproductive justice, community safety, environmental justice, equitable public education, as well as voting rights. And there's so many other important issues that I hope to work on with the residents and constituents of this district when I am elected on May 17th. I'm proud to share that I've been endorsed by the Sunrise Movement Pittsburgh, as well as the Pittsburgh Federation of Teachers. Those are extremely important endorsements that align with the values of my campaign and my decades of leadership. I am the most experienced on policy in Harrisburg in this race. There's never been a woman elected to this position in over 50 years, and it is time for us to elect Black women to public office and to elect Latasha D. Mays on May 17th. I am running to disrupt politics as usual and not to maintain the status quo. So I ask for your vote and I ask for your support on May 17th. You can find me at latasha4pa.com and Latasha4pa on all social media. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Turning it over to you, Randall.
Yeah. Again, I want to thank everybody and also thank the other candidates. I think it's extremely important that people run for office. And again, I think I've talked a lot about my history and my background, but one thing I'm most proud of the last few years was being out there marching in those streets, organizing a few marches. People heard me; they know I have no problem calling out, whether it be elected officials or UPMC, if I think that they're doing wrong. But I also think, again, we need to talk about how we practice politics in the Black community. People talked about several endorsements. Latasha mentioned the Pittsburgh Federation of Teachers. I've never heard of any opportunity. I really do think that we should, among ourselves, talk about where money comes from and how much money comes into these campaigns. We're running street to street campaign. We can set our own rules. But when money is coming from all over the place, whose voices are really being heard? If particularly outside organizing, if it's inside the community, that's one thing. But these outside groups who are picking and choosing, maybe our leaders, we should be concerned about that. And so we should also think about how in this opportunity we can set an example about how politics should run. We'll have city council races and things like that. But the one thing we need to be very serious about is how much money is coming into these races, where they're coming from. We need to take the opportunity that we, the people, choose. And that is what I believe is going to happen in the May 17th election. I think we, the people, there's a lot of people in this district, particularly young people, they're not interested in this establishment politics. They're not interested in the same old thing. They're not interested in the same old voices. My voice has been around a while, but they want voices that speak who are not afraid to stand up to any powers that be and speak the truth to them and be consistent in that. And so that's what I hope to continue to talk about, particularly as your next state representative.
Thank you all so very much for joining us for the candidate forum for the 24th Legislative District. I thank you all so much. You can turn your cameras off and leave, and we're just going to do some wrap-ups.
Thank you.
Yes. And so, like I said, this has been your candidate forum for your Democratic candidates for the Legislative 24th District. We did reach out to all candidates and invite them on. There are no conservative contested registered Republican candidates. That's why they're not on the forum. But if you heard something that inspired you to want to go out and register to vote, I'm just going to read down some of the information that you will need to know. The May 17th primaries on Tuesday, May 17th from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. The last day to register to vote here in Pennsylvania is going to be 5 p.m. on May 2nd. And the last day to request a mail-in or absentee ballot is going to be by 5 p.m. on May 10th. Here still in Pennsylvania, you are eligible to register to vote. If you're a resident of Pennsylvania, you are going to be 18 by election day, and you have not been convicted of any election crimes against the election the past 3 years, and you're not currently serving a sentence of incarceration. For more information, you can always go online to vote.pa.gov. Also, if you happen to go to our website, you couldn't find it, do not worry. It was not a mistake. We are in the process of revamping our website, and we'll be launching it in the coming weeks. So please stay tuned for that. But remember to like and follow, subscribe on our YouTube channel. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and we have a lot of stuff happening. So again, please make sure you're following us, keeping the pressure on. Notice we did change the format. So last time people said 1 minute was too short of a time to give answers. So we did increase it. We'll be playing around with the times because, again, want to make sure you have the best informed information to make your decision when you go and vote. So again, I am your host, Miracle Jones. Thank you so much for spending your hour with me. I hope you've been inspired by this wonderful pool of candidates, and we'll see you next Monday at 7 p.m. as we follow up and continue our spring series candidate forum. Thank you so much and have a great day.